Okay, so welcome back to the next part of the tutorial where we're gonna place the IK, or we're gonna parent the IK handle underneath the IK controller or the hand controller, and we're gonna put the pole vector into a different position, and then we're gonna freeze them in that position. And the reason why I'm doing these things, it's not exactly a pretty rigging, but it's more for showing you guys a different arbitrary of commands, so you have something in your arsenal when you need to start and go out and do your own stuff. So in this case, I'm just gonna source our library as we used to do and try and run our code, and let's see what we get made. So we have this hand controller where we want to parent this IK handle underneath, so hit P. Okay, so that's just a regular parent command that we need to use there. So in order to, you can see that highlight, so that's cool. And then the next thing we need to do is move this thing out here, and you can see either we can use a move command or we can use a different command. So I'm going to show you like a different command, but as you can see, you can also use a move. That would also work with Python. I like to use a command that's called setAttr. So that's setting an attribute. So we can define what kind of attribute we want to set. In this case, we want to move the set this set attribute to probably something like -1 or something. Let's see, how much do we have it in here? So if I say set this one in, okay, so we actually have quite a lot. So let's say -5. So you can see if I do it on one value at a time, I actually get this line of code, and I can easily just save that here. So this is how, if there's some code that I don't know how to do, I would do it manually, and then I'll see what kind of code does it make, and then I'll convert that into Python and put it into my script. But in this case, like set attributes and all that stuff, you kind of know them after a fairly short amount of time of rigging, because you use them, or scripting, because you use them so much. So and the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna say freeze transformation, which is, I believe, make identity. So an identity is just basically, we're gonna make an identity of an object to be 0, 0, 0 in all these ones. So we're gonna reset them. So I can't remember all the flags. I could go into the command editor, and I can just hit freeze here, and then I get this line here. And you can see that sort of like gave me this line that I'm gonna go in and convert into Python. So I'm just gonna take these 3 lines that I just did here, Control X, so I cut them out. Actually, I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that I don't mess anything up here. So let's try and delete the controller, delete the IK handle, and delete the other controller, and copy paste or cut these lines and go into the script editor. Go in here, parent in our code here, which will turn into a little bit of a pseudocode. So parent IK under controller hand, and we want to move our, oh sorry, so let's try and get a hashtag here, move pole vector. As I've mentioned before, this is not how I would normally place a pole vector, but in this case, normally I would use vector math, but in this case I just want to show you guys how this works. So to show you some commands, and freeze objects. Actually, I kind of think that we should parent the IK after we've frozen it. I can't remember if something's gonna break doing that process, but just to make sure, we freeze our controllers first, and then we parent the objects underneath. So let's try and see how we need to move the pole vector, and we do that by using the set attribute. So this is a mel command, right? So we need to convert that into a Python. So commands.setAttr, and I want to do exactly on the same objects here. So I want to set the attribute on these things here. In this case, I don't really want to do it on this one, because if I just paste in this name, as soon as I'm giving my script R side, it can't really find this. So we kind of like need to define that we want to use the arm control. And if you remember, we have that control thrown back to us here, so that's out of the control. So if we go down here and just do as we've done before, where we use the the percentage sign and an S to throw in a string in here, and then we write control. As far as I remember, we do return 2 things from our control hierarchy. Let's see here. No, we only give back the transform node of our control, so that's quite normal. So in this case we only have one controller, so that's only one object here, so that fits in here. The reason why, if this was a list, like if this was a list of objects, right, I would get an error because Python wouldn't know which object in the control list I was aiming for using. But in this case we only have one object or one item in this name, so this will work. And then after we've set the attribute, we have to set a comma, because now we want to make sure that we set it in -5, so we actually translate it into the right position. So right, what I'm saying here is move this controller, translate it in set. What controller? This controller, and translate it to -5. That's good. Then the next thing we want to do is we want to freeze our object. So let's say command start make identity true. So now we're freezing them, so we want to apply equals to true. So let's say equal 1, because we equals to 1 in Python. We could, in Python you can decide to either write 1 or true with a capital T, or false. But I like to just use 1s and 0s. It's a little bit, it makes the code a little bit shorter to look at. And which objects do we want to freeze? We want to freeze our pol v, and we want to freeze our ctrl. And obviously when you have flags in mel, you use a dash in front of them. We don't do that in Python, so we have to say t equals to 1, and then we comma in between all our flags, right? So let's try and delete this. And this is basically, these flags means, some of you will already have guessed it, it's quite simple. So I want to make identity apply true. Which one do I want to apply it to? The translates, the rotates, the scales. And then there's probably some sort of pivot stuff here. I don't know what these ones are. We can look that up. So let's see, what do we have? N and Pn. So let's try and use this. So make identity, and we can double click or triple click on that, or double click on that, and then say command documentation, go in here. And let's see, normal doesn't really matter since we're working with a surface, or with a, sorry, with that's a NURBS object, so it doesn't really matter, it's a NURBS curve. And let's see, what was the other one? It was Pn preserve normals. If this flag is true, the normals on the polygon, so we're not dealing with polygons, so I suppose like already now this information doesn't really matter. So let's just go into our code. We don't really want any code that we don't need, so I'm just going to delete these two, so we don't need to concern ourselves with that. We just want to concern that our scale is equal to, our scale is being applied, our rotate is being applied, and our translate is being applied. So remember that this is not values, right? This is not the value that I'm putting into the translate. This is saying that the flag is true. So so instead of writing, I mean, you would think that scale is equal to 1. Okay, scale should always be 1, but rotate should not be 1, it should be 0. But it's just, it's a true or false statement, it's not. So I'm just going to write true so you guys are understanding what that means. And then the last thing I want to do is use the parent command, right? So it works just as in Maya, so I would say parent command start parent. And I want to parent my, let's see here, my IK underneath my, let's see, I want to parent my IK underneath my controller, so CTRL. And then I hit save. So that was actually what we did right here, so we don't need that one anymore. So if I hit save now and go back to my Maya, okay, so something obviously went wrong. I took the wrong controller and moved it back. So yeah, obviously we're not trying to set attribute on my control. I'm trying to set attribute on my pole vector control. Let's try and run that again, and there we have it. And now that's great. Now we actually have a, oh, so one thing we need to do is make sure that this controller is being accepted as a pole vector control. So how do we do that? We selected the controller, and we selected the IK handle, and then we say constraint and pole vector. And let's see what So pull vector constraint weight equals to 1. So let's try and take this code, put it down here. It looks correct. So there is a command called pull vector constraint. So sometimes it's quite nice to just take these things from the script editor. And this is how I suggest you do in the beginning. Later on, you wanna there's some things that you don't want to write exactly off the script editor, but as a beginning point, this is great. So in this case, I'm triple clicking on the line. I just wanted to make sure. The reason why I copy pasted this down here instead of just directly into my script editor is because I want to see that this highlights in blue, because not all commands in Mel translate into Python. So sometimes you need to do a little bit of a hack, but we can talk about using Mel code inside of Python later on. So right now I'm just going to copy or cut this out and go into the script editor Sublime here. So let's try and before we parent, because parent kind of seemed like the last thing we want to do. We want to do it after the freezing. So let's see. Constraint make pull vector connection. Oh, make pull vector constraint. So we're gonna say commands pull vector constraint, and in this case you want to think about it as the same way as you use it inside of Maya, right? So if you think about it, like how do I select when I parent something, if I want to parent my IK handle like this one underneath my controller, I select the IK handle first and I select the controller afterwards, and then I hit P. Obviously it's already parented underneath it, but so that's how you do that. But if you want to constrain something, you do it the other way around, right? If I wanted the IK handle to be constrained to this, I would select my controller first and then this one, and you should do the same thing in your code. So in this case I want to say my poll, let's try and do it like that, because then it's gonna give me, there you go, poll vector. Oh, that's of course wrong. Oh, there we go. Pull vector control, and then I'm selecting my IK, and that's how you should do it, right? So let's try and hit save, go into our code or into our scene and test the script. Let's try and just kill these, and there we go. And now we have like a little perfect, quite shitty but working arm rig where our pull vector is active as well. So one thing I want to try quickly is just make sure that if I take this arm now and I say, let's try and undo our code, and I say skeleton mirror, and I say search for L, look for replace with R. Okay, it creates that. And I say build this on the left one, but what if I go in here and say build on the right one, use for the right side. Cool. So now I never have to do both sides anymore. I can just run my script on both of them. So that's brilliant. Yeah, and you would do the same thing for a leg or anything like that. So yeah, it's pretty simple. And in the next lecture, let's see if I'm gonna make one more in this series. Maybe there's gonna be a tips and tricks tutorial about how to loop stuff and all that, because there might be some things that we can do. I think I would be interested in making a loop tutorial for this one as well, so we can sort of like tell it to do both arms instead of one at a time. But yeah, if you made it this far, then very well done. I'll see you in the next lecture.